welcome back to the class, everyone. Most of the characters that we use in Galaxy of Heroes want an obnoxious amount of speed from modding. Luckily for us, there are some out there that actually excel from being slower, and it's time we shed some light on them. So this video is going to just be going through the 10 characters, or rather the 10 best characters that function well slow. It's not in any specific order, I just kind of put them in there as my thought process went about them. Some of these characters are quite new. As you'll see, I do have some purple gears here that I myself haven't even gotten really up, but a lot of these characters are also a little bit older. I don't think, by the way, this is an excuse to stop farming speed mods. This is just where a lot of the other mods that you have that didn't really turn out super well went. Just because, again, the game wants an obnoxious amount of speed. But I'll start right off with the two droids that serve under General Grievous. I'm just talking about them at the same time because they're used in the same team. And while they both benefit highly from being slow, their modding as individuals is very different. So let's take apart B2 real quickly. The way the B2 was made to function was always through gaining turn meter whenever another ally was hit. He has, through this unique, a 40% chance to gain 100% turn meter, meaning that he is not really reliant on having speed to take turns. Rather, he's reliant on tenacity to make sure he doesn't get debuffs like shock or doubt or daze that'll keep him from being able to do that. So then he can therefore take turns, remove all the enemy's buffs, and then pass turn meter along to his allies as well. So this video really isn't meant to be, you know, a super in-depth modding video on these 10 characters, just to say it, they're good slow. But let's just go ahead and go over it real quickly. B2 does benefit highly from a crit avoidance arrow. The reason behind that is B1 gives crit avoidance to the whole General Grievous team, so you have a little bit of a stacking mechanic there. On top of that, he does benefit, as we previously mentioned, from tenacity to just make sure you never get shocked in the first place or anything funny like that. And then protection is always nice, and even a little bit of potency doesn't hurt, because while General Grievous does have stacking potency, sometimes you really do want those debuffs to land right off the bat. Next up is going to be his buddy Droidica. They do serve in the same team, but as previously mentioned, the reasons why they both want to be slow are quite different. And I will say this, if you're using Droidica in Territory Wars with the Territory War Omicron, this is like the most ideal scenario ever for him to be slow, because there is a small portion of times in Grand Arena where you want him to be just a little bit faster than the rest of your team after you factor in the speed boost he gets from not being in his shield generator, so that he can go before them and he's able to assist constantly with his basic due to his Zeta. But getting, again, importantly, especially YNTW, is he's so good slow, because when we start to look at his basic, he deals true damage, which can't be critically hit, but is also going to ignore defense, which scales based on the difference in their speed. So the enemy that is hitting, let's say it's a Galactic Legend with 600 speed, and your Droidica is down at a very low 133, and then being even slower than that because you are now rolled into your shield generator, you cut your speed back, you're going to do some pretty hefty damage. And if you speed him up, really to no actual gain, you're going to be missing out on a lot of the damage that is coming with that. The other benefit of him being slow is he gets to build up more charge as his allies continue to take turns, and really the enemy takes turns as well. So very good to have both of them on the slower side while they're modding. It within itself is different. Now, a much newer character we have here, different from the last two, is going to be Junda. She, and I will say this, she has the appearance that she wants her whole team to be slow. I'm really not on board with that, at least yet, but she herself, it's quite apparent through not only her leadership, but also her unique abilities, that you want her to be essentially getting lapped by the enemy team, so that when she does take her turns, she has all the tools that she needs. And this is going to highly revolve around her unique ability, where it says at the end of each of her turns, her cooldowns are increased by 1. So if you have her taking all the turns in the world in front of the rest of the team, she's just going to keep increasing her cooldowns, and you don't get to really use her specials, which, by the way, one of them starts on cooldown. However, if she is super slow and constantly getting lapped, whenever an enemy takes a turn, her cooldowns are decreased by 1. This becomes important when we look at what Determined Assault does. Not only does it give defense penetration up to the rest of the team, which is great, especially when you start thinking about having Fulcrum and Malicos with her in there, but also she is going to be getting this cooldown reduced, which starts at 10. that she can deal 200% of max health damage to an enemy, which not always, but if an enemy character is health modded, that's a one-shot. Like, think of Rexecute out there that you've used on your 501st teams. Once your 501st allies take enough turns and you have that max health high enough, you just start one-shotting anyone who isn't too immune to max health damage. That's really where it comes out. There is some other stuff that goes on in her leadership that you do benefit from just not really having a bunch of speed and instead focusing on their stats. You gain turn meter, you get some nice stacking stats before the enemy takes a turn, and there's a few other little things in here too, but mostly we want to focus on, you don't necessarily need to have every single time she takes a turn that she's able to use this, but I've had it once every other turn, and gosh, at least attacking it from a defensive perspective is super annoying when she's throwing out essentially a one-shot every 2 or 3 turns. So that is going to be Seer again, quite a bit of a newer character. Next up is going to be Jedi Knight Luke. This is lead only, by the way. If you're using him in any other circumstance, under Jedi Knight Revan or Jedi Master Luke lead, he does want some speed because most of his value at that point does come from the turns he takes. The reason why is because he is going to, whenever he gets his turn, he's going to lower the enemy speed to his base speed, which I know there's some confusion with this wording. That is his speeds after mods. So if you jack him up to 250 speed or you leave him down at like 130 or whatever his exact base speed is, that's the speed that's going to be changed on the enemy side. And this can be really detrimental for enemy squads. And I don't use Jedi Luke on his own leadership. I use him under Jedi Master Luke primarily, and every once in a while Jedi Knight Luke or Jedi Knight Revan. But if you leave him down at like, I think it's 110, 120 base speed, and then the rest of your surrounding team, like Shah, Coda, and whoever else, are sitting at 320, 330, they're getting to take like 3 whole teams or turns before the enemy ever gets to go, assuming they don't really have any turn meter to help them catch up, which is, it's enough to kind of turn the battle of most fights. And there's a reason why this gets turned off against Galactic Legends. It would be very detrimental for SLKR or C or whoever to go from their 600 final speed after all the bonuses down to something disgusting like 130. But again, that is only for his lead. Next up is going to be Zabar, a character that has always been kind of relevant-ish, and it has more so become into relevancy with the Tarful lead out there. And there's really 2 reasons surrounding why. Number 1, Zabar is a great passive taunting tank. What I mean by that is he doesn't have to actually take a turn to be able to taunt. He gains taunt every single time someone falls below 100% health, which is actually kind of often, and it's typically not enough to one-shot a character, so he gets to interrupt a lot of what the enemy is trying to do. On top of that, now, not only does he have a passive taunt, but Tarful himself will make him pre-taunt, cool, is able to make him taunt through one of his specials, also cool, and on top of that, and I think this is probably the most relevant thing, can actually cleanse Zabar himself. And that's a big deal because anytime that he gets shock or confusion or buff immunity or whatever it is out there that prevents him from taunting, he kind of needed to take turns to be able to shake it off. And now he doesn't really need to. Tarful can just take as many turns as he wants and cleanse him, and then Zabar gets to be annoying all over again. So, and the other reason why we actually don't really care about him taking turns is because this ability right here, Zabar gains 20% defense each time he takes damage from an attack for 1 turn. So this 1 turn is important. If you keep your Zabar from taking a turn and he's just sitting there, this doesn't go away, the stacking defense, and this just doesn't stop going up until that turn comes. And if the turn ever comes, his defense just gets astronomical to the point where you really have to have max health damage to be able to kill him. You can't actually rely on getting through any of this because it not only gets really high, but you also start to add in everything that Tarful is doing with defense and max health and whatnot, and Zabar just kind of becomes unkillable. So overall, pretty good character, but he does benefit from being slower because of all the reasons we just mentioned, not just within himself, but under the new Wookiee team. Next up is going to be Marin. This is like, you don't really need me to explain this one. This is probably the simplest of every single character in here. You go to her unique, you look at the very bottom line, and it says, well, Marin has allies, which, by the way, she's not a solo character, so doesn't do great at that. That's not really our angle here. Her speed is set to 0, and she's immune to turn meter manipulation. So, mod her however fast you want. 400, that's not possible. 400 speed, 110, whatever number you pick, doesn't matter. She's regulated to 0 because how CG wants her to function all has to do with debuffs and turn meter that can't be resisted and stuff like that. So ultimately, her speed just doesn't matter. That being said, I'm not 100% sure on her modding. I've heard a lot of conflicting things, actually. I've heard anywhere from health, protection, offense, and actually tenacity and potency. So pretty much everything but speed. So yeah, don't really feel like you need to do anything there in regards to speed. Just know that she can function well below, and then, check some players who already have her built up that aren't Calvin, that kind of know what they're doing if you're looking for actual recommendations beyond that. But again, this is kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the video, where all of your rejects out there that got really good offense hits or really good potency hits or really good defense hits or whatever it is, they didn't hit speed well. Now is their time to shine, especially with Marin. Next up is going to be Enfys Nest, and this is kind of cool because this works both defensively as well as for solos, depending on what your roster is able to do or what is presented with it as far as opportunities go. I do like Nest as tenacious as possible. The reason being, she is going to be able to build up pretty much unlimited stacking critical damage every single time an enemy loses a buff or a debuff. So there's a lot of heavy debuff and buff teams out there right now. She herself gives debuffs, so really against any team that she's functional against, she'll be able to add to that. And then the reason why she benefits from being slow is because she's going to start putting up this shell, a bonus protection, which, by the way, can't be dispelled. So the only way you can get rid of it is just by hitting her really stinking hard. And eventually this gets to a point, normally the enemy team is going to have just 5 attackers. It's going to be a few supports or whatever. They're just going to give her this unbreakable shell. And if she can't be dazed or dazed or anything like that, she's going to be able to counter. And if she can counter, she can do damage, she can spread more debuffs, and eventually her critical damage can get so high she can actually take out some pretty good teams out there, especially in 3v3. Maul's the biggest one that comes to mind. If he has like Bow or Canderous or something like that doesn't prevent this for whatever reason. So tenacity is very nice because of that. She does again benefit from being slow because she gets to hide behind that protection shield, and she doesn't need to take turns for that critical damage to go up. It is also really nice when you leave her on defense for her to just never take a turn against Imperial Troopers or CLS, although I think that really happens no matter what, as long as you don't have like a really fast Nest to begin with. There are ways to use her fast, by the way, but this is just she's one of the best that functions as slow. The next 2 characters are going to have a very similar theme, and that is going to be TM and Cleanse. So there are a lot of characters in the game that really don't focus that much on speed, but rather focus on turn meter gains. 5s is kind of another example. But the big difference between L3 and 5s or whatever other characters gaining turn meter is, she has a way to self-cleanse. Because again, one of the big dangers of relying on turn meter is if you get dazed or shocked or something like that, it's going to cut back on the turn meter. You can't get it, and then you need to take a turn to be able to get rid of it, unless you are like our good friend L3 here, and anytime that you take damage, you cleanse a random scoundrel ally, which includes yourself. So if she's the only one out there that has it, and she's taunting, and the enemy is forced to hit her, boom, it's gone. She can gain turn meter again whenever the enemy uses an AoE or something like that, and goes on to just do the rest of her crazy stuff. And this is particularly really nice because L3 as a tank is kind of stat hungry. She can use critical avoidance. That is a part of her kit already, so having another source in there is nice. Protection is also nice on top of that. Defense there, she actually doesn't really even hate health because of how her basic works. She just gets kind of unlimited stacking now. So overall, just wonderful tank. Don't need to worry that much about speed because she has the TM to catch up, and she has the cleanse on her own, really regardless of what team you're using her on, to be able to get rid of that. Next up is going to be Savage, and Savage has essentially the same exact reasoning, although he arguably does it a little bit better than L3 does. Sorry, L3. So if we look at his kit, and this is primarily in GAC with his Omicron, by the way, he himself does gain a ton of turn meter whenever he takes damage, and then on top of that, he is going to cleanse himself whenever he's critically hit. And this is, I guess this is actually kind of really creative. While he has resilient defense, which is the buff he gets, stacking defense, and is inflicted with vulnerable, which means any time that he's hit by any attack that isn't true damage, he has to take a critical hit, and that this vulnerable can't be prevented or dispelled. He's going to be constantly cleansing himself over and over, and then again gaining all that turn meter that comes with this kit naturally. So he doesn't really need speed, and similar to L3, this is a nice additive because he's stat hungry. He really likes to have a ton of health. He likes to have a ton of defense. On top of that, he doesn't, if you're using it for solos on offense, he really doesn't hate an offense set and even a crit damage triangle. So being able to keep his speeds on kind of the lower side, like +10s or something like that, and then even being able to put a health arrow on him instead of having to go the route of using a speed arrow is very nice, because again, he just does benefit. Doesn't necessarily benefit from being slower, but he also doesn't benefit from being faster. So take advantage of that in the ways that you will by modding him healthier, tankier, and even to do more damage. So those are our top 10 best slow characters, either having a specific benefit to being slow or really just no advantage to being fast. Let me know in the chat what other character that you've liked with a different modding, whether it be slow or not. And until next time, stay awesome.